Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Science of Mind class. I'm Dr. Petra, and we are so happy to be in the room this morning together and to be online together. Super happy to be doing that. Gosh, we're still in the general summary. But slowly but surely we're getting there, which is super cool because it's, again, as I've said before, if you ever need a reminder of how all of this is supposed to hang together, just go into the general summary because it's a great recap. So we're starting on page 412. In some of this, there's some really important reminders in this part of the general summary. The first one, right off the bat, if we believe in suffering, we shall suffer, right? This does not mean that stuff doesn't happen. And it doesn't mean that we don't occasionally have painful experiences. I mean, seriously painful experiences. Divorce, the loss of a loved one, loss of a job. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can be seriously painful. The key is whether or not it causes suffering. So, you know, we could just stop for a minute and ask ourselves, what's the difference between experiencing the pain of an outpicturing and the experiencing suffering over it? So we're going to surprise our crew right now and say that we are going to open with that question. What is the difference? What causes pain to turn into suffering? Who wants to make a suggestion? We've got Willie up here, so we can use a microphone for Willie. Let's hear what Willie has to say. There we go. Thank you.
Thanks, I'm Willie. Suffering feels more like having a pity party ongoing. Just why me, poor me, on and on and on and on and on. Why does this always happen to me?
Yeah, good. So I think part of the what you're saying is the ongoingness of it, right? And the second part of it is how we're holding it. Why me? Why does this always happen to me? Right? Good. What else? Anybody want to add anything different or more to that? Here, we have right here. We'll just pass it. Come on. We have Chloe and Bob from Mexico in the house. Yay!
Just maybe elaborating on what Willie said. Experiencing the pain in the moment, but not going into the future with it, not going into the past with it. Because even the most painful situations, probably at this very moment, I know what I say when I feel that type of pain, and all is well, all is well, all is well, all will be well.
Right.
And just holding on to that for this second, I can bear it.
Yes.
And again, it's the running ahead, I think, and building that whole story around it that makes it suffering.
Turns it into suffering.
Yeah.
Is so much of it, thank you, Glo, so much of it is the story that we tell about it. And another way of saying it is the way in which we hold the experience that we're having, right? And so years and years and years and years ago, Wayne Dyer said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. What we have done often in New Thought in the Science of Mind is we seek to avoid pain. And when we have a painful experience, we're surprised, we get angry, we do go into why is this happening to me? Did I do something wrong? Surely I'm a spiritual person and I shouldn't have had this happen, or I should get over it right away, right? And all of that is what can turn just a seriously painful experience into suffering. It's the long term. All right, I see we have a comment online. Joseph.
Looks like we have a comment from Amanda. I'm going to ask you to unmute your mic.
Great. Good morning, Amanda. We're not hearing her in the room. Are you there? Uh-oh. We have a technical difficulty. Amanda, we're going to try to get you. And so if you have a comment, we'll come back to you. Yeah, so, right, it's the way in which we hold the experience. And I love, Glow, what you said, it all will be well, right? Sometimes I say to myself, this too shall pass. It will pass because we're living in an experience of change. Life is constantly changing, and it will pass. What we don't want to do is avoid the pain itself. I think the other thing that causes suffering is our resistance to it. And that's that why me, why is it happening to me, this shouldn't be happening, I wish it weren't happening, this is, and we resist it. And so then what we do is we don't feel it, and we lodge it in our bodies, we lodge it in our energetic field, in our psyche, and each time something painful happens, everything that we've stuffed in there gets activated. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think for me, the biggest suffering that I can impose upon myself is the belief that it will never end. That it will never end. And we keep it alive by picking at it. Picking at it, picking at it, picking at it. Why did this happen to me? This shouldn't have happened, over and over and over and over again. And so and of course, we continue then to keep it alive. We continue to keep it in front of us. And we continue to create experiences out of that very way of looking at the world. So we should choose that which we wish to embody, and by constant attention to it, take on all its characteristics. All will be well. All will be well. I will get through this. There is that within me that's capable of handling this. I am supported by the universe. There's enough love and strength for me to handle whatever is here. It's okay to feel my feelings. They won't overwhelm me, right? These are all the ways in which we embody a different way of engaging. And so, we can become very superstitious or unwilling to be uncomfortable or to just experience life. And we're here, embodied souls, and our job is to experience and express life. And so the outward form of life is doing this, good and bad and happy and sad, and things work out and there's painful experiences, right? And our spirituality is the steady knowing that is the thing that carries us through. What we don't want to do is flatten our lives so that we never have pain, which is, of course, which flattens then our joy and our ability to experience and just savor whatever is going on in life. And I don't know, I'm going to say something weird. Maybe this isn't true for you, but every once in a while I have like a really blue day. And truthfully, I savor it. Like it's a little melancholy, and I'm like, and then I get my cup of tea, and there's like, but if I'm in resistance to it, then I can exacerbate that. So even that we can savor. I discovered, it was with my mother's passing that I discovered that one can actually hold the paradox of deep and profound sorrow, grief of her passing, and extraordinary joy. One, that she was my mother and in my life for so long, and two, the extraordinary experience I had of her experience of moving on to the next, whatever the next thing is. I had such an experience of that, that there was such deep joy right in the midst of all this grief. And those are the things that keep us from turning it into suffering. All right, so Joseph, coming back to you.
Looks like we have another question from
Okay.
Connie. I'll go ahead and ask you to unmute your mic for me.
Good morning, Connie. Good morning, Connie. I'm thinking our speaker's not working. Something is a little bit off with our technology. So I'm not sure what it is. Joseph and Ryan are you there, Connie?
Yeah, I'm here.
There she is. Yay.
Okay, good. You can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I just want to share a short story.
Uh-huh.
It was a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3. A very, very close friend of mine had a major traumatic experience in her family. It was horrendous. I'm not going to go into it. And I went to 2 people over at CSL and told them about it. I went to Rob Bright after the Sunday celebration, and then Vince when he was with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I, separately, and I told them the story, and I said, I'm really, really upset about this. They both said exactly the same thing, and they used exactly the same words separately. They said, you can't fix it, and take good care of yourself.
You're right.
And as soon as they said that, I jumped right out of the hole, and I realized, yes, that is my spiritual truth, and it was such a relief.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my little
Beautiful.
contribution.
Thanks, Connie. Right, and that's the thing. The wish to fix it is, and for it to be different, is the resistance to what is. Right, and that's what causes suffering. The resistance to what is, the resistance to the fact that somebody has had a horrifically traumatic experience. It is what it is. It can't ever be changed. The person died. That can't ever be changed. But when we put it into a different context or a framework, and we pour our love over the experience, then we ourselves can have a very different experience. And so it's not that we don't have pain, and it's not that things don't happen. That is a faulty, that was what we call magical thinking. What we don't want to do is to dwell upon it with our story, which is different than over and over and over again feeling the feelings of it as they come crashing over us. To feel the feeling, whether that's for a week, a month, a year, or 5 years, to feel the feeling and let that be exactly what it is in the moment. So we have another comment over here. Can we get a microphone this direction here? Thanks, Richard. Good morning, Shauna.
Good morning, Petra. I also think that there's another underlying thing that gets in our way sometimes, and it's this, belief that, many of us have, been raised with, or is just, part of our human belief system that being human is about suffering.
Yes.
And I run into it in so many ways that, myself, family members, people I work with, that when bad things happen, there's sort of this underlying unconscious belief, well, that's part of being human, and, I'm supposed to suffer to learn.
Yeah, and there you go. That is right there is the crux of it, right? That somehow the suffering, I'm supposed to suffer to learn, as if the suffering is somehow ordained or somehow designed into the system so that we grow. And of course, what we understand is that growth is always optional. But so we can choose to grow from experiences, to learn to handle and hold the human experience. But to think that there's something outside of ourselves that has ordained that life is about suffering, we just have to look in nature and we see that that's not true. Life is about cooperation and about collaboration and about beauty, and it's about expression. And one of the most challenging additions to our culture, besides this Judeo-Christian Western tradition that that you were born wrong, that your suffering is inevitable and somehow you have to be saved, on top of that, we have the complete misunderstanding of what Darwin was talking about when he talked about the survival of the fittest. And that was about competing, and if you were fit, you could compete and you could overcome. And that wasn't at all the case, right? The survival of the fittest is the one who can adapt, the one who can cooperate. And biology and environmental science and so many sciences are corroborating this idea that life is about flourishing. And so why would life and nature be about flourishing, and somehow that would not be true about us? Excuse me. Julia, if you're getting me a glass of water, I super appreciate it. Something got me. And so this skips us down to the paragraph. We're going to skip over the next paragraph, and we're going to go to the last full paragraph on this page, because you said something really important, Shauna. The will of God. The will of God. And all the ways in which we say that, the different words we use to talk about the will of God. Thank you so much. Super appreciate it. Oh my gosh. Something got me. Woo. There we go. The will of God. And as if the will of God was to cause us to suffer so that we could learn. And in the science of mind, we do not believe that this is the will of God. We believe that the will of God, the will of life, the will of spirit is to grow and flourish, to express and experience more of life. The will of God is always toward that which expresses life and happiness. To suppose that the will of God could be in opposition to the advancement of our lives would be to think of spirit as being self-destructive. Why? Because if we're individualized expressions of the infinite, if we're the place where the infinite is waking up to itself, why would it impose lessons of suffering on itself on purpose? Right? What it's doing is allowing the individualized expression to discover the creative process, to discover how we co-create with life, to discover what kinds of outcomes our choices have. These are all discoveries, and we can learn and grow from every experience. It's simply the experience we're having is the outcome of our individual and collective thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes about how life operates, right? And that's what we're constantly experiencing. And we get to learn from that because we choose to learn from it, not because something has said, well, you're going to suffer until you learn from it, right? It's simply the outpicturing of the creative process. If you want a different outcome, you have to actually start from a different place. You have to think about it differently. And so this idea of this oneness that's expressing as us, the whole trajectory of life must be for more life. I mean, even in the cycles of nature, even in the quote-unquote savagery of nature, right? It's all in service to more life. I mean, lions eat the antelope so that the lion can live, which is why there's so many antelope. And then the antelope is then food not only for the lion, but the hyenas, and then the vultures, and then the little insects, and everything is used, everything is recycled, everything goes back into the earth, so that not only all of that life can survive, but then it actually goes into the soil so that plant life, right? It's a constant process. I mean, we just really have to look carefully and see. Now, and then we get to be awakened to, are we contributing? Are we in alignment with life flourishing, moving towards life? Or do we have an expectation of suffering? Do we have an expectation that the only way we can learn is through suffering? Now, it does appear sometimes that that is our experience, right? Sometimes we don't do it, and we don't do it, and we don't do it until we get the universal 2x4. However, the universal 2x4 is not actually required, right? It's not required. That's why we learn to pay attention. We learn to become self-aware. We learn to listen to the stories we're telling, the words we're saying, the inner dialogue, and the way in which we're holding things. We can become aware of that and go, oh, no, that's not how I want to see it, right? As Glow so beautifully said earlier, to decide, no, I'm going to say all is well. I don't know how, that's the law's job, but I'm going to affirm all is well. I'm taking a stance on how I'm going to take this up. And so in New Thought and in the Science of Mind, we do a subtle, what shall we say? We do a subtle acceptance and restatement of the will of God. And we think we've overcome it, but when you say, well, this is what was supposed to happen, I'm supposed to learn from this, I'm supposed to have this experience, all of that is simply another version of it's the will of God. The will of God is only for you to flourish and thrive, to be as alive as you possibly can, period. That's it. That's it. The rest of it is simply the consequences and the benefits of the use we make of the creative process. And the more that we can examine that and understand that, right, the more choice we can make, the more choices we can make, and the more powerfully aligned our choices become with a life that flourishes, with a life that is contributing, with a life that is an experience and an expression of who we are and who we want to be. It doesn't mean that we can't learn from experiences. It means that those experiences weren't ordained by God so that we could learn. Do you see the difference, right? It's a really important difference. So I would love for everybody to expunge from their vocabulary, well, this is what was supposed to happen. No, this is what happened because this is the law outpicturing the conscious and unconscious beliefs that are manifesting, period. What we do with it is our choice. How we engage with it is our choice. May it be painful? Yes. Does it have to be suffering? No. And sometimes we equate the two because we just don't want to feel the pain. We think any pain is suffering. No, it's not. It's just the pain is the real experience. The suffering is when we wallow in it, ongoing. And we keep telling the story over and over again in the same way, right? Not allowing ourselves to heal or to move on or to find a different way of seeing it. The pain can galvanize us, right? We're having pain in our body, might say, might need to have a little lifestyle change. Is the pain there to make you come to that decision? No, the pain is the result of previous lifestyle choices. Now we're experiencing the consequences of that, and if we are reflective, self-aware, examining ourselves and our lives, we can come to the conclusion, maybe I should make some different choices. Do you see? And this is why Ralph Waldo Emerson says in one of his essays, he said the dice of God are always loaded. They're loaded in our favor. We have such a deep belief that the dice of God is loaded for our suffering, just as Shauna said, is loaded to teach us a lesson, is loaded to cause us to stumble and then to punish us for stumbling. The dice of God is always loaded. What that means is the trajectory of the law is to support life and to support life flourishing. The impulse is life, is love, spirit giving all of itself as creation, expressing all of itself as creation, and the law is simply the orderly way in which that happens. And of course, garbage in, garbage out. Right? If we put in false beliefs, we're going to get false experiences. So our ability to really pay attention to these things is so important. And to remember that this trajectory is always for good. It's always for more life. Does that mean it's never going to change? Of course not, because everything is being expressed in the space-time continuum. What is the single thing that you can say is absolutely true about physical reality? It's always changing, right? That's the nature. That's why it's called the relative. It's always changing. No matter how fabulous your relationship is, no matter how fabulous your work is, no matter how brilliantly things are unfolding, at some point it will change. If it could be 40 years from now, but it will inevitably change. You may decide to make a change. You may simply reach retirement age. You may, who knows what, right? You may decide to hair off onto a whole nother business and be equally as successful. The outpicturing is constantly changing. And so that's where the resistance sets in. We didn't want it to change. We needed it for it to be different than it is. And then we're in that same cycle of suffering because we said, okay, it's good, it's perfect. Okay, now nobody move, nobody breathe, don't anybody change. Nothing gets, right? It's set. I did my spiritual mind treatment. I set my intention, boom, 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 boom. It's all lined up. Okay, it's going to be like this forever. Oh, no, it's not. And then we hold on to it, right? And the Buddhists, in the Four Noble Truths, right? Suffering, desire is the base of suffering. Suffering, to overcome a suffering is non-attachment. Well, in the science of mind, we do not believe that it's desire that's the base of suffering. Because the deepest desires is that life wanting to flourish, right? And so our deepest desires, not the ones that are caused by media and people and, our parents and egoic things, but our deepest desires is actually life wanting to flourish as us. It is the attachment that causes suffering. The attachment that it doesn't change. The attachment that it's going to be this way. And when it changes, oh my gosh, right? Life has come to a screeching halt. And so it's when we need for things to be different than they are in the moment. Now, this doesn't mean we can't create something new. This doesn't mean we can't create good out of the pain we're experiencing. This doesn't mean we can't create good out of the change we're experiencing. We get to do that. We get to decide that. Going back to Glow's comment, all is well. All is well. All will be well. I will ride through this in a good way. There'll be a good outcome. I'm simply going to affirm that. I don't need to know what it is, but I'm trusting that that's the case because life is for life. And so when we can allow the changes to be less surprising and less, to hold on to them so tightly, that's what the Buddhist means. About this idea of non-attachment. And it's not, I don't care. It's not, I'm not participating. It's not that I'm not going to create something that I want, which is not the way that Science of Mind interprets those statements. It's that we desire for things to stay the same. And that's where we get in trouble because the nature of life is changing. Ultimately, it's always changing for good. There's another question. Why is it when something changes, we lose a job, we lose a relationship, we think why is it that we inevitably assume the outcome is going to be worse? Right? I mean, it's astonishing. And then we say to ourselves, well, this is the best I can do, so I better make it work. Maybe it's not the best you can do. Maybe whatever's next is actually better. What if we simply decided that what was next was actually better? We get to do that. Right? We get to choose. We get to choose. So going back to the paragraph right before, the objective form to which we give our attention is created from the very attention which we give to it. So if we want to create good out of a painful situation, we give our attention to that which good, or to simply the idea that something good will come of it. And so I love this imagery. Life is a blackboard upon which we are consciously or unconsciously write those messages which govern us. We write them. We hold the chalk and the eraser in our hand, but are ignorant of this fact. What we now experience, we need not continue to experience. But the hand which holds the eraser must do its neutralizing work. No, this is not how I am going to conceive of my future. more of the same, more suffering, more pain. It's just going to always be like this. No, that's the eraser, neutralizing the thought so that we can write a new thought there on the blackboard. All will be well. I'm going to just stand that life is for life, and it's for my life, and it's for the life of humanity, and it's for the life of the planet, right? That's some of the deepest work I'm doing these days. Happy is the one who holds the projecting machine firmly in his conscious thought and who knows how to make conscious use of it. The will of God is such a thorny issue, and it's so embedded in our consciousness. This idea of suffering is so embedded in the way in which we have taken up life. And the science of mind wants us to move into that deeper understanding about who we are and what's really going on. So we're going to stop there, and we're going to see what other comments, questions, stories, thoughts you have about this. What's difficult about it? What is empowering about it? So we have a few minutes to engage on it. So Joseph, we're going to turn back to you, see what's going on out there, and we have a comment here in the room. So we're going to come to the room, and then we're going to check on what's going on out there.
Shauna again. It's interesting to me as I think about it. It takes a lot of personal accountability to live this way. And if you think about, I have a mental accountability scale, and you think about, where blame is. So if you blame a God for ordaining suffering in your life, right, it's not very, it lets you off the hook from being accountable. And I think that's the sort of weird comfort of that belief system in a way.
Yeah. And we do the same thing when we believe in evil or a force for evil. Well, the devil made me do it. And so I'm not accountable. I'm not responsible. Somehow some evil force took over, right? So either God has ordained suffering or there's an evil force causing us to suffer, both of which do, in fact, let us off the hook. We don't have to take responsibility for the fact that we hold the chalk and the eraser in our own hands. I think you say something really important. And it is one of the more difficult challenges in science of mind and in New Thought. I mean, it's a radical accountability for our lives. Recognizing, of course, that when we're in partnership, the other person is doing the same. When we're in a community, the whole community is adding to the collective consciousness of the community. And clearly, we're part of the collective consciousness of a culture, of a nation, right, of humanity as a whole. These things are, in fact, things that we ourselves are responding to and that we have in our subconscious mind. And we want to deliberately be working with those because we also don't want to blame that. Well, it's just, it's just the race consciousness, so we're just stuck with it. It's really no better, right? It's all kind of the same. And yet, if we want to take radical responsibility, that's what I'm going to talk about. That's what I'm going to talk about in our celebration here in a little bit. It's a deep and powerful accountability. And are we willing to be that accountable is a profound question. Are we willing to recognize that we are, in fact, the universe creating as an individual and be accountable for what we're creating? Good. All right. I'm going to check in with Joseph. Anything going on out there? Any comments or questions, Joseph?
Good morning. Yes, ma'am. We just want to thank everybody for joining us out here on the online presence. If you want to join this conversation, you can do so by, if you're on Zoom, just raise your hand, tap the raise your hand icon. Or if you're on Facebook Live joining us, just go ahead and enter your questions in the chat. So we'll give you a second to do so. Like always, we want to keep your presence and your identities anonymous, so we won't be mentioning your name, your full name. So at this time, you can ask any questions.
Yeah, ask you any questions, make your comments, see what we've got going on out there. I know we talked a lot. I sprung the question on you early. Got to mix it up sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember. Do we have something?
Looks like we have a question from
Perfect. Or a comment?
from Anita.
Great.
I'll go ahead and ask you to unmute your mic.
Good morning, Anita.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Pedro. You know, just thinking about the idea of suffering and you mentioned it earlier, right? It's how we take it up and hold onto it, right? And that's, I think, really part of the key is that we make that choice to hold onto it, and then the suffering increases because we're holding that same energy in everything we do, everywhere we go, right? In all activities of our life. And that is what and so then that energetic level flows out into our work and everything that we're doing. And so our interactions with other people, you know, just change because of that energetic that we're holding on to, you know, like we have to protect it somehow. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when we make that decision to let it go, to be with it, feel the feelings, but not let it control and run our life any longer, then we start to see the shift.
Yeah, and it's really important, right? These things are really important, and I'm so glad you restate that, Anita, right? It's so important. The only challenge, of course, becomes when we run up against somebody else's thoughts and beliefs and attitudes. And I can remember first getting into Science of Mind, and when I first started talking about my father, abusive, rageaholic man, literally somebody said to me, "Why did you create that as your reality? How did you attract that?" And I'm like, oh, okay. I was like 4. I'm thinking that he was creating that reality, not me. He was the one who was creating that reality. He and my mother created that reality, and we were a part of that. Now the question, and of course I absorbed a fair amount of negativity, false beliefs, and challenging viewpoints because of it. Right? And so then I spent a whole boatload of adult years playing all of that out until I really did the work to realize that I hadn't created that. Actually, my father had created that. My father created the mess in our family. That was his outpicturing, and I needed to not carry it around anymore. Have I still been engaged occasionally with people that are abusive? Yes, absolutely. Because abusive people are out there, and they do actually believe that that's the way life is, that's the way it's okay to behave. What I've come to understand is that I no longer need to hold them in my life based on a belief that this is the way it is, right? Because that's what I grew up in. This is the way it is. So keep continually recreating that. As I began to see that my father was the one who had all those belief systems, and from his mother and his childhood and yada, 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 and back and back and back and back, right? That was a very real experience for him. It very really affected me. But as an adult, then I get to make choices about that. And I get to say, I'm not going to keep building my life about that. Did that mean I never had another abusive person in my life? No, I actually attracted some. Why? Because I got to practice not taking it on. I got to practice saying, no, that's not how I want to be. That's not who I want to be. Because it doesn't magically change everybody else, right? What it changes is our engagement. And there you say something so important, Anita. That's what changes the suffering. Was it painful to then run across another abusive person? You bet it was. But it was only suffering if I believed that the way that life, that engagement was happening is the only way that it could be, because I had absorbed that. Do you see? So we want to be careful too that we recognize that other people, they have their own free will too. and they have their own unconscious patterns and beliefs and things that they are absolutely playing out. The The question is, how are we engaging with it? How are we holding it? What's the work we're doing in our own consciousness? Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Anita. All right, Joseph.
Looks like we have another question. This one is from Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Yay. We're happy to hear you.
Yay. I have an interesting situation that I am living right now that I just wanted to share with y'all that I think really reflects what you're talking about, but it is a little heavy, but it gets a little better, so bear with me.
Okay.
So I'm moving into a new house. I went to go look at the house, and there's these bird nests right by the porch, and they have baby birds in them, and they're just the sweetest things. So I told the realtor, do not remove the bird nests. I want them to stay right there. Just, clean up the poop on the ground.
Right.
It's fine. I move in, and both of the bird nests are gone.
Oh.
And it's just devastating for me, and I'm processing, and I cannot believe that anyone would have the audacity to remove bird nests with baby birds in them, I'm just going through a lot in my mind over this. The next day, the birds have completely rebuilt the nest in the exact same spot. And for me, it was just like to see these birds completely rebuild in the exact same spot. It was very eye-opening for me. And
Yes.
here I am, a week later, still bothered by this.
Yes.
Still suffering from just the reality of the situation. And yet I watch these birds every day live in the moment and just rebuilding their lives. I'm just astonished by it. And I just wanted to share that with you because I feel like it's powerful.
It is powerful. Yes, Amanda, thank you so much for sharing that, because it is heartbreaking, right? And that's the pain. And we should be heartbroken about things that are painful. We're not trying to not be heartbroken about it. And you had specifically said that, please don't do that, and then they went ahead and did it. But what a beautiful reflection of life being for life and life being about life. And here these birds are rebuilding their nests. Unfortunately, they will probably keep doing that. Not unfortunately, fortunately. You just have to keep cleaning the front stoop. I've had that in a house where the birds came every year and they built in the corner, and we stopped using the front door while they were there because it was a little stinky, but it was fabulous. It was so fabulous. And I would be exactly the same way. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Leave those right where they are. And so, right, and so that's, you've shared like the nuance of that so beautifully. I mean, there's heartbreak and pain, and you haven't gotten over it yet. Right? That's the suffering piece. And we don't necessarily feel like we have to get over it like soon. The question is, are you still blaming the realtor 6 months from now or a year from now? That might be then come suffering. And what a beautiful reflection of life. Life is for life. Life is always for life. And that's what we can trust. Right? And I think that's one of the most beautiful things, is that we can cast ourselves into the stream of life and trust that. Yes, we're writing it, but life has a trajectory. That trajectory is for good, for life. And as we cast ourselves into that, and we're writing on our chalkboard, if we use that analogy, or we're, in the stream of life deciding where we're going to go, we can really trust that life is buoying us up and helping us in that process. And that all will be well. I love that we started with that glow. All will be well. And, I love the phrase, this too shall pass. It will pass. And something new will be created. A new bird's nest, a new opportunity, a new life. So thank you so much for sharing that. All right, so we're going to come to the end of today. We're so happy to spend this time with you. We are going to continue to go through the general summary. I am thinking that we're going to keep on the general summary. We'll probably dip in and out of the chapters that come afterwards. And I'm thinking in September we're going to start back on page 1. So if you have somebody that you'd like to invite to the class and you want them to get started at the beginning, start with us again in September. In the meantime, we're going to finish up this fabulous chapter over the next month or so. And then, as I said, we're going to kind of dip in and out of what comes next. so that we can begin again. It's so great. It's so great to spend the time with you guys in the room. It's so great to spend the time with you online. We'll see you in our celebration in 30 minutes. We'll see you in our Sunday celebration. And yeah, we'll see you wherever we see you, on campus or online. Bye for now.